The Manitowoc Pilot, 1903. The founders of our government strongly advocated the necessity of opening up and improving the means of internal communications. The immortal Washington retired from the pomp and circumstance of glorious war to occupy the honorable position of sovereign citizen. U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs in Washington, D.C. Lawless Ones, the resurgence of the sovereign citizen movement, 33 pages, and it calls them the lawless ones. The sovereign citizens are the lawless ones. But in the paper of 1903, I just read that George Washington rose to the honorable position of a sovereign citizen. George Washington was a lawless one? You can't be right and wrong at the same time. Again, U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., they claim that their forefather, George Washington, was the first president of the United States. But it states that he was a sovereign citizen. You see the confusion? The sovereign citizen, Governor Folk, and this is a governor, and his anxiety to clean out grafting and corruption is said by the Philadelphia Public Ledger to desire to disfranchise those citizens who will not vote. The Ledger proposes to punish such voters by making them do jury duty and to continue his name on the jury list until his name appeared again on the poll list. How will either remedy improve a corrupt government, which is the object sought after by Governor Folk and the Ledger? What is the reason that many voters do not avail themselves of the highest prerogative of the sovereign citizen? Again, the news is speaking of the sovereign citizen. Unswerving devotion to our government and the principles upon which it was established and has been maintained is essential to the efficiency of the national forces, and especially is this so in a democratic government, which the Constitution states we have the right to a republican form of government, where the individual, in order to be a perfect soldier, must first be a true citizen. The boast that every soldier of a great nation carried a marshal's baton in his knapsack is in a higher sense more than equaled in significance by the fact that every American soldier personifies sovereign citizenship and may be his own conduct exemplify impartial justice to those who have never experienced it, and in result of the highest liberty to those who have been strangers to it, thereby aiding to secure for his country a moral influence not otherwise attainable. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Domestic Terrorism, the Sovereign Citizen Movement. Domestic terrorism. Today we look at a third threat, the Sovereign Citizen Extremist Movement. Sovereign citizens are anti-government extremists. However, again, at the beginning of the video, they openly said that George Washington was a sovereign citizen. So is the Federal Bureau of Investigations telling you that George Washington was an extremist and an anti-government man who held ideology? You can't be right and wrong at the same time. I would like to give a caveat before I give the conclusion. I do not identify as a sovereign citizen. You know, I thought it was a word that was just brought up out of nowhere, but now as I study, I see that it was back in the past. However, I do not identify as a sovereign citizen. I identify with a nationality in regards to Cornish, and I know that ties me with the family of nations, the human race, with the Declaration of Human Rights, which is already enshrined within the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So I do not identify as that. However, I do now sympathize with my brother who did his due diligence and went and studied and seen what the minutes of the Congress was back in the past and sees that it is contradicting to today's times. A man can feel like he's being violated, go study the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and say, well, I'm going to go back and study what the founding fathers was speaking about and then follow what they were saying. In regards to the Supreme Court, which is the interpretation of the Constitution, it says if you live your life in harmony with the stare decisis, the Supreme Court case rulings, you have the perfect defense for willfulness. So when these brothers go back and start studying what the founding fathers was doing, and then they're being called anti-government, that kind of shows you that the ones who are sitting in the seats either have infiltrated the government or they are not studying what their forefathers demonstrated. I'm going to play the audio of a video at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing where Senator John Kennedy questioned Charnel, nominee to be United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Washington. And this is what happened.
Judge on the far end. Tell me what Article 5 of the Constitution does.
Article 5 is not coming to mind at the moment.
Okay. How about Article 2?
Neither is Article 2.
So when you have the rights of men and women put in the hands of these so-called judges who don't even study the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the human rights, and they clearly state that even if they're found in error, they have sovereign immunity, which means that they can accidentally or purposely violate you and be found with sovereign immunity and not be punished. You have today's U.S. president that said publicly that if you feel the government is tyrant and you wish to abolish it, good luck, we have fighter jets. And that means that the people has already slacked too much. The only way this can be stopped is by a divine intervention of our Creator.
You couldn't buy cannon. Those who say the blood of patriots, and all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that there's always been the ability to rationally limit the type of weapon that can be owned and who can own it.
We shall be just in judging other men only when we are charitable. See therefore that you exercise your office cautiously and charitably, lest in passing judgment upon the criminal you commit a greater wrong than that for which you condemn him, and the consequences of which must be eternal. Orphanage in childhood or base, dissolute, and abandoned parents, and unfriended youth, evil companions, ignorance and want of moral cultivation, the temptations of sinful pleasure or grinding poverty, familiarity with vice, a scorned and blighted name, and desperate fortunes. These are the causes that might have led anyone among us to unfurl the bloody flag of universal defiance. Albert Pike.